Transformational, Belated, Unapologetic.
Hi, everyone. You're listening to The Brave Files, and I'm your host, Heather Vickery. Today, we are talking to one of my nearest and dearest, most incredible friends, Stevie Manns. And Stevie is this incredible energy human being that goes out and very unapologetically declares what is not acceptable to them and who they are in the world without any boxes, parameters, or boundaries. We talk about living out loud, no matter what, and being a beacon of light for someone else in the world. We do dig in a little bit on some self-inflicted internal homophobia, which many folks can identify with. Remember, we are sharing only queer voices this month. I'm so honored to share Stevie's story with you, especially from the perspective of somebody who worked in a very traditional male-dominated industry. So stick with us. We have a lot of fun in this conversation. I cannot wait to share it with you. Let's get started. We are so excited to be partnering with the Brown Cow Ice Cream Parlor to raise awareness and funds for Brave Space Alliance throughout this entire Pride Month. Brave Space Alliance is an organization that I personally hold very dear. They provide education and access-based programming for BIPOC, trans, and gender nonconforming individuals. Throughout the month of June, the Brown Cow is showing their pride with some really fun specials, including their famous 7-layer rainbow cake, rainbow frosted sugar cookies. These are my favorite cookies in the entire world. And they even have a unique Pride ice cream flavor that was conceived of and developed by their LGBTQ creamery manager. When you buy any of these Pride items, either in person or online, the Brown Cow will donate 20% of the sales to Brave Space, and it gets better. If you mention the Brave Files podcast when you order, I will personally match that donation, and the Brown Cow will match my match. That means that by ordering delicious Pride treats and mentioning the Brave Files podcast, 60% of your order will go directly towards Brave Space Alliance. You'll find the Brown Cow in charming downtown Forest Park, Illinois, or you can order from them directly online at browncowicecream.com. Thank you for helping us celebrate Pride Month and make a difference in the LGBTQ community. You're listening to The Brave Files, where we share stories from people who've stepped out of fear and into bravery in every possible way. What we know for sure is that when we choose bravely on purpose, we choose bigger, we win bigger, and it's contagious. It's our hope that these stories connect with you and encourage you to embrace bravery in every possible way, day after day. Together, we can build a movement that enriches both our lives and our communities. The Brave Files is brought to you by Vickery & Co., a success and leadership coaching firm dedicated to helping you build a life and a business that you are absolutely in love with. Vickery & Co. offers group programs, membership communities, one-on-one coaching, VIP days, corporate trainings, workshops, keynote speaking, and so much more. Visit vickeryandco.com to get all the details. Hey folks, you are in for a treat today because I have invited one of my favorite people in the entire world to join us today. This is my friend Stevie Manns, and it's just one of those things where we met, and I can't speak for both of us, but for me it was like instant, electric, meant to be friends. This is going down. I see you shaking your head, but no one else can see you. I'll let you.
Nodding, not shaking.
Nodding. No, yeah, nodding. Agreeing. It was an agreeable thing. Sorry. Maybe that's a British American. I don't know. Anyway, I invited Stevie here specifically for Pride Month. As you all know, we're celebrating only queer voices this month, which we celebrate queer voices a lot. But Pride Month representation matters. It matters because we are not equal anywhere, but especially in the United States. And so this is about love and joy and celebration and pride and honoring one another and lifting one another up. And Stevie is such an incredible human being. Stevie always lives their truth, never takes anybody's bullshit, and is the very first person to say, oops, you might want to fix that. It's even happened with me, and I actually love them for that.
Thank you very much.
Stevie, you came out as non-binary while working in a very traditional male-dominated industry. And you even started the company's trans ERG. Do I have that right?
No, not quite. Sort of, but not really. At that time, I was co-chairing the LBT plus working group within the Pride Network, and then we, as part of that, said, "Hey, we actually need our own trans and non-binary group." And through that group, we then were able to change policies and benefits, which is not something that had been really looked at in much detail up until that point.
That's fucking badass, though. I mean, so we don't have to say the name of the company that you used to work for, but it was in the finance industry, which is really not well known for supporting women, for equality, for any of those things. And to be able to actually move the needle it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and I will say I did not do it alone. It was
Of
it
course
was a
not.
complete, team effort. And there had been some policy changes, but not enough to the point where trans and non-binary people felt comfortable coming out. They were
Mm.
there, but there was no community. And I think one of the things that we found was the trans and non-binary community not wanting to be part of the Pride Network because they didn't feel themselves represented in the Pride Network, which was really disappointing. And I think for me, up until that point, I had joined the network when I first arrived in New York, and I had been part of the network in Scotland where I was working and living before then. So I was, out as a lesbian in the finance industry in this company. And previously in a different company, I had actually had a lot of pushback and homophobic comments made to me. So I was really hesitant to even come out at work. But I do remember in the first Pride month I was there, the company had a wonderful plethora of resources and events for their Pride month, and one of which was a talk. I have no idea who gave this talk, and this was years ago, but I do remember that the gentleman was talking about how we lose so much productivity. We lose 33% of our productivity by covering and hiding who we are at work if we're not out. I was blown away by that number.
Wow, that's a big number.
It's huge. And, obviously, as a company wants their employees, they don't want to, be losing 33% of efficiency from their employees because they don't feel comfortable at work. And as a person, I don't want to lose 33% of my efficiencies so that because I'm already disadvantaged and I'm already not going to progress as quickly as your average straight white guy at a
Mhm.
firm like that, at a corporate investment bank. So for me, seeing that number, I was like, oh, I need to somehow deal with this in a way that works for me. And by joining the Pride Network, and as I had done, and co-chairing things and getting involved and, creating and designing the events that I wanted to see, then I was able to kind of really feel part of something. And then, flash forward to when the non-binary and trans network was being created. I had already been involved really quite heavily, but a lot of the people that were trans at the firm had either joined the firm or had come out fairly late on, so hadn't been part of it already. So I think I became quite a natural person to be a hub maybe for this group
Mm.
because I had the connections and I had the network within the Pride Network where I could, go to the managing director or the head of this or that and say, hey, this needs to change. Let's go and speak to the head of HR. Let's go and speak to the head of medical and talk about benefits. I already had those connections and I was already plugged in. So it made a lot of sense for me to lead that group. So I was really proud of what we were able to do. But, I have to say, while the industry and those companies are not known for being great, there are pockets that are very supportive. The HR department that I was working with were very supportive. And initially they said, hey, we don't think we can get this done for January, which would have been like this year, because there's too much to change. And we were like, no, you have to. You absolutely have to. And that's when we called up the head of HR and the head of, the chief medical officer. And then they did it. Like, just to give you an example, so the kind of benefits that weren't covered were things like top surgery,
Sure.
or like facial electrolysis. There were certain, things that, vocal coaching for trans women. There were certain things that weren't covered that were really important. Even as far as mental health, it's hugely important that we are supported and have mental health and counseling and therapy and all of this.
Yeah.
And it's really, really hard to find an LGBT therapist who is covered under insurance. So
Mhm.
those are the kinds of things that, we were trying to get done. I can't remember the entire list, but it was a long list,
It's
and
a
they
big,
gave us
long
most
list.
of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I see you glossing over a little, and this is probably your British humbleness at play. Yes, you had those connections. Yes, you had already worked really hard on that. Because I know you so well, you also are tenacious as fuck. And when you see a need, a person in need, or a situation where you know that with a little tenacity you can create change, you're like a fucking honey badger. You're like, I'm going and fix this. But in all the right ways. The most lovable honey badger out there. Non-binary honey badger. um
Gender non-conforming honey badger, I like that.
So, I know you're not one to brag on yourself, but I want to just acknowledge that people like you in our community, in the queer community, are so important because so many folks just they don't have that go get 'em tenacious gene that you have. And when they see it in you and they know, oh, this person, see, remember, I always say there are no safe spaces, there are only safe people. And when you so clearly come out of the gate as a safe person, it changes the space for everyone else. And that's a gift you bring.
Oh, thank you. I don't think it happened initially. It's taken a long time for me to become this person. And I think that I started I don't think I advocated for myself before.
Mm,
I think the last couple of years in terms of social justice really opened my eyes to a lot of things and the way that I advocated for others and the way that I didn't advocate for myself.
I could
So
see
I
that.
think that was a real, self-checking moment of, "Oh, okay. Why am I not doing this for myself?" And I think I certainly had a really before I was even really aware of my own gender identity, I had a real connection and I had a real protective feeling over the trans community. And I wasn't seeing a lot of trans people at work. I wasn't seeing a lot of trans people in sort of investment banking or the corporate sphere. And I was like, "They exist," they exist, and
Yeah.
whether or not they feel comfortable, and I just, I got really angry, and then when I
Mm.
saw them and I was like, "They're here and I'm part of them and we exist," I was like, "Well, this is shit. There's lots of stuff to fix here," and, I think there was w a big part of it is that trans people are already having to deal with so much shit. Like,
Mhm.
they're having to deal with so much shit in terms of their own transness coming
Mhm.
out, all of the social aspects that come with that, all of the aspects that come with that, changing your gender at work. They're, dealing with your colleagues, correcting them, and then to go into work and then have to change things. It's such an emotional burden. And I felt that I just really wanted to help with that and spearhead some of these changes that we were behind. And I think what really you got me on my soapbox now. What really angered me
I knew I just had to let you go, like,
just
get you started and
yeah,
let you go.
just push a button. I think some of it is that, there is a corporate, rainbow thing where they subscribe to all of the right things. They're part of HRC. They give
Do the
money.
shit.
They do the shit.
Yeah.
And HRC says, "Okay, here you go. Here's a list of things that, we ask you to do, and we'll give you 100% on our checklist, and you can put this on your website, and there you go. You're a great LGBTQ plus IA employer." Alright. And what I found was, hang on, what HRC were actually asking of them was quite minimal.
Yeah.
And, all they had to do really was give some money and have a trans policy or have some inclusive policies. I am being a bit, um, I'm being a little broad and general. I actually do really like the HRC, but I feel like they could ask more from corporates
Yeah.
in terms of their policies.
Yeah.
So if anyone is listening, then do the things.
Yeah, HRC. We want you to be listening. Okay, so I'd like to go back, if it's all right with you, before you just indicated that you've come out twice. You came
Mm.
out as a lesbian. How old were you when you
Uh,
initially came out?
well, I say 21 because that was the time when everyone knew. I think I
Mm.
started when I was 19, and by the time I was 21, everyone knew. And by that, I mean my mother. Um, she's always the last to know. Oops.
Did you know before 19?
Yes, of course. I you know,
I
that
listen.
yeah. I was at a conservative boarding school. Yes, I 100% knew. I just didn't there was a lot of internalized homophobia. I didn't want to accept it of myself. I didn't want to be gay.
Mm.
It was just, it was okay for everyone else, but it wasn't okay for me. And, I knew from such a young age when I remember my first crush, and I must have been, I don't know, 5 years old, and it was my babysitter whose name was Melanie, but I couldn't pronounce that, and I called her Lemony.
I love
Um,
that.
yeah.
She was too
Um,
old for you. I'm just
yes.
kidding.
Not anymore. No, I'm kidding.
Oh,
Um,
hey.
so teasing, I'm happily married. Um, but,
Don't
and I started to notice other crushes that I was having, and, they were often on, teachers. I think I remember having a crush on my music teachers and then subsequently, like, a tennis coach, and I was a mature only child, so I would often, I don't know, chat with some of the adults or the older kids a bit more. So I certainly knew that, I maybe I was confused, I think, because I didn't know if I admired them or if I fancied
Mm.
them. And in hindsight, yeah, I fancied them.
That's very similar because I didn't know until I was in my 30s, and I didn't come out until I was in my late 30s.
Mm,
And you know that story, and most of the
I
listeners know that
do.
story. But I always tell folks that because of the way women talk about one another, "Oh, she's so
Mm,
hot. Oh, she's" I just didn't know until I knew that the way that felt inside of my body was different than the way it felt inside of a straight woman's body.
mhm.
I didn't get it until I got it. And I was like, "Wait a minute, hold on." Okay, so at 19, you came out to yourself, you started coming out. You had this, as you just described it, sort of self-inflicted internal homophobia, which is really, really,
Mm,
really common that I love and support everyone else, but gosh, that can't be me.
mhm.
But you did it anyway because it is you and you're wonderful. How did that go? How did coming out the first time go? Because I guess where I'm going with this is what I have observed is that in the end, it's much easier to come out as gay or lesbian or even bi than it is to come out as trans or gender nonconforming.
I in both times, I had a paralyzing fear. I remember at the time, my dad had not long split up from his second wife, evil stepmother incarnate, and she
I have one of those.
oh, yeah, they're great. He went through I call it a God phase. He went through a phase of going to church and all that stuff, and I was panicking about coming out to him a little bit because I thought, "Oh, God and stuff don't accept God and his people, all of his people, his lovely people, depending on
Uh,
which part of the church you're in, not
yeah,
all
I'm
the
like,
people."
"Lovely, maybe." I don't
Yeah.
know.
I went to Catholic church recently for a funeral, and oh my God, it was terrifying.
Yeah.
That's another story. I thought it was something else. I'd never yeah, anyway. So I was scared about telling my dad. The first family member I told was my grandfather, and he was wonderful, and he was so cute, and he was like, "Oh, okay." Well, well, I'll be honest, I'm not entirely sure I get it, but I love you, and it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, great. Okay, cool." And I said, "What do you think about dad?" And he said, "Oh, no, he'll be fine." And dad was fine, and he was very supportive. I mean, he's a man of few words, but he is supportive, and he loves me very much, and he shows me that. My mother, on the other hand, didn't I was absolutely scared that she would throw me out, for good reason. And in fact, when I told her, her response was, "Is this because you can't get a boyfriend?"
Oh, Jesus.
Whilst it's somewhat funny, it's not supportive, and I will say I think the only reason I was not thrown out was because she thought I was doing it
To act out.
to her. Yes. She thought it was a phase. She continued to tell people it was a phase for years, actually. So we've had, I mean, we have a difficult relationship. I'm sure she'll never listen to this podcast. I don't think she knows what a podcast is. And coming out as non-binary, that I feel like that was harder, but I'm not sure because I've had so much distance between it. So I came out as non-binary when I was, hang on, I turned 37 last year, and so I came out sometime in May, so I would have been 36. So there were, 15 plus years between coming outs, and I was absolutely terrified. It took me 2 years to do it. I actually went to therapy for something completely unrelated, as it turned out. And that really was the start of my gender journey. And I picked a trans therapist very specifically. I'd actually had a couple of panic attacks. And when I started working with her, we started to talk about maybe why I wanted to see a trans therapist and how, was dressing a particular way. And one of the reasons that I went to therapy was that I had been sexually assaulted at a Christmas party.
At a work Christmas party.
Yes, at a work
Yeah.
Christmas party, which is another reason we're not mentioning the name of the firm that I worked for, but if you know me, then unfortunately you will know. So I was sexually assaulted at this Christmas party, and it threw me for a loop because I look the way that I do, and
Which is
this
fucking fabulous, for the
thank you.
record, the way you look.
Thank you very much. But I feel I look 100% queer.
Sure. You do.
I think I do.
You were assaulted by a white man, right?
Yes.
They don't care.
Well, I don't understand that.
He saw you as a woman and as someone
Yes.
that he could prey on, that
Right.
should want him. You should want him.
Of course. Why I
Duh.
mean, right, why not? But it really confused me because and that was sort of the first time that it not that it had happened, obviously, I just mean in terms of attention from men, but maybe attention from men that was that aggressive since I had started to dress the way that I did, since I'd had my hair cut shorter. Um, I was very confused by the whole thing, and it prompted, some older issues to come up, and then we spoke about my gender presentation and what that meant to me. And when I delved into gender and gender identity plus the presentation and started to break it down and what did it mean to me and for me, I realized that, male, female, that's just ridiculous. Why do we have these two options? And why do I get treated one way or the other depending on which box I'm in? I
Now
just felt
that's
it
a
was
good
absolute
question.
bullshit. And it is bullshit. It is a construct, and it's a, patriarchal construct. It's colonialism. There's a lot in it when you really dig into it. And I was like, "Oh, this,"
Yeah.
and it was like my eyes were opened, Pandora's box was opened, and there was no way I could put it back in the box. And
Mm.
when we kept going into it, and at the time, my name was not Stevie, and my trans therapist asked me, and I the reason I bring up that she's trans is it was great to have these conversations with her.
Yeah.
And I almost felt a bit guilty because I didn't want to kind of ask her these questions as somebody who was trans, but it was so I felt seen, and I felt that
Mhm.
she could give me her experience back in a way that was not intrusive. But she asked me, she asked me some questions that I was scared to ask myself, and she sort of pushed me just a little bit, not too much. And she certainly never pushed me down a road that I didn't want to go down. She asked me if I wanted to go by any other name. And I remember there was a character on a TV show that I love, Madam Secretary, oh, Tia Leone, called Stevie. And I was like, oh, I really like that name. And while Stevie herself was quite a feminine character, I felt that it was the perfect kind of gender neutral name for me. And so that was sort of the first part of it. And she only she called me Stevie. And then we I branched out. I went on a vacation, like a sports, vacation. It was like a boxing retreat, and I tried that name with these people. And I realized, though, that whilst it was great to be called Stevie, and everyone, like, people just knew me as Stevie from the outset, it didn't change how they saw my gender.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, okay, that's not enough. It's not enough to be called Stevie, because people still don't see me for how I see myself. And then talking about how I felt coming out, I was paralyzed that I wouldn't be lovable. Like, that was the real fear. And I think actually, for many LGBTQ people, even when they're just coming out with their sexuality, it's still a, who's going to love me? Or will my family still love me? These are like, it's that sort of foundational question. And I remember I had some unresolved feelings for somebody, and I felt that if it were to be resolved in a positive way, as in us getting together, this would not be something like them, like me coming out as non-binary. They couldn't love me as that. Like, that was sort of the one thing. And I think once I ended that situation, which was never really a situation, once I ended that in my head, I was like, I don't need that person's approval. The only person's approval I need to do this is me. And if that person isn't going to love me for who I am, then it's not the right person for me anyway. So why am I even focusing on this? And I found that, and you and I have talked about this, but I found that when I said at work, hey, I want to come out as non-binary, and I started to say out loud the things that I would not accept, my life completely changed. I met my wife.
Mic drop.
Mic drop. I met my wife. I completely changed careers. I now have my dream job. And for me, I feel like all of this is tied into accepting who I am, and not just sort of coming out as non-binary. It's just being me. And it's all of the wonderful things that have happened in my life really have only happened because I did that. And I'm still shocked.
I love that. When I said out loud the things that I would no longer accept.
Oh, that's a
when everything
quotable
changed.
moment, isn't it?
Indeed it is, my dear. Indeed it is. Really, really powerful. I think for so many people in so many ways, so many reasons, so many communities, when we are able to say out loud what we are no longer willing to accept, everything changes. The people around us change. They change the way they interact with us, but they change because we've changed.
Yes. And that is really, that's one of the hard things, because there are some people who don't accept it. And there are a number of people who have been jettisoned by their own choice, not because I've made an ultimatums, but because they couldn't understand it, or they can't understand it, and they don't want to. And they feel that I have changed, and I'm not the person I was. And that's, how can we, who are you? I don't even know do I even know you anymore? That's how they feel. And they have themselves, either chosen not to remain friends, or in, familial relationships with me as a result. And that's hard. That is really, really hard. There have been some really long relationships that have disintegrated as a result in some way or another, not necessarily directly, but indirectly as well.
Yeah. It's hard and it's sad because you are still you. You're more you. And for anyone, listening, I want to make sure. It's what one of the many things I love about you, Stevie, is just you, as you've gone through this process and gotten really clear with yourself, they can do what they're going to do. But again, what you're no longer willing to accept. And it doesn't change your truth. That doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. It doesn't mean that there aren't some times where it's particularly difficult, but you stand really firm in that. I have a question that if I cross a line, I know that you will tell me.
Sure.
And I appreciate that. As someone who is super cisgender, I am all woman.
Yeah, you are.
I wonder, like, how did you know that you weren't? And also, is it is this non-binary space a constant space, or is it fluid where you sometimes feel more feminine, sometimes feel more masculine? To me, it feels like I wonder if you feel what's the word? I don't want to say uncomfortable because I think you feel incredibly comfortable, but like, does it matter that there's not an assigned gender? Like, is it fluid? I guess. I don't know how else to ask that question. I don't even know what I'm asking.
How did I know that I wasn't one or the other? Should we go there first?
Yeah, we can go there first.
I just knew that in some of the ways that I wanted to present, I had always been, you know, prior to being non-binary, I was always a tomboy. My
Mm.
mother loved to dress
Mhm.
me up in fucking frilly things and lacy shit, and I hated it. Not a fan. And I would much prefer to be running around the yard, or the garden if you're in the UK, in cycling shorts and t-shirt. And that was just who I was, and I was, sporty and all of that, and, like, by all intents and purposes, we have given that type of child the term tomboy so that kids can either grow out of it or lean into it and still accept their gender as female.
Mhm.
And, I do remember dressing up at one point as a kid as a boy. Like, and not to say that I feel like I want to completely transition to male. I don't feel like that, and there are some reasons that I don't. I don't want to assume male privilege.
Mm. Wow.
It's hugely important to me, the experiences that I've had and how I have experienced life as a woman. I don't want to pass. It's kind of challenging because I don't want to pass as male. Would my life be a little bit easier? Probably. And yes, it absolutely,
Yeah.
not even probably, absolutely, it
Yeah.
would be. But I don't want to deny any of these experiences. And I stand in solidarity with women and non-binary folk. Not to say that there's anything wrong with being a trans man. It's just not how I feel.
Yeah.
That's not how I want to present myself, and that's not how I feel that my gender is. I do wear a lot of male clothing. By all accounts, I shop in the male section. But, I think
You are so dapper.
thank you so much. I've kind of joked around and I've said to some people almost in a way that they can understand it is, I feel like sometimes I dress as a gay man.
Yes, that's accurate.
Yeah, and it's really, to me, that sort of encompasses, for some people, they understand that to mean femininity and masculinity. For me, that just
Sure.
means I'm stylish. But but I get to wear the clothes that I feel most comfortable in, and,
Yeah.
in a presentation that I feel comfortable in, with a flair that I enjoy. But, I'm still like, I went to a wedding recently, and it was the first time I had worn a tie. This is so silly. It was the first time I had worn a tie to a wedding, and, you know, that was the most, if you like, masculine I had ever looked, and I will say I don't identify as a butch lesbian. That was something that I had to really contend with. I was like, is this thing about me? Is this that am I just butch and I don't want to be butch? Am I so homophobic about my own self that I don't want to be a butch lesbian? Th
You are not
Thank
butch.
you.
Like,
I'm really not.
you are, like, really not butch. We went hiking in Sedona, and hiking might be too strong of a word for the thing we did, but you were,
It's a stroll. It's a
you were
light stroll.
you were not having it. You were like, "Oh, but there are rocks. Oh, but there are bugs." You are not butch.
I mean, but then again, it's like, how do you define butch? Do you define butch as somebody who's rugged and masculine and, gets a bit
I think
dirty,
so.
or what,
I do
or is
think
butch a
so.
style? And I think it's, we have, this is what I mean, we have all of these boxes, and
Um,
what are we doing with them?
well, clearly we don't need all of the boxes, and assumptions are shit, but when I think of someone butch, I do think of behavior
Yes,
more than
fair.
attire and style.
For the record, I now have a flick knife or a pen knife thing. It was a gift, but I do feel very
You
rugged,
could
and I can do things when I need to, like open boxes.
But,
Open my
it's one of the
Amazon
things that
boxes. God.
exactly. One of the things that I so enjoy about you is you just claim whatever you wanna claim. Like, I know you love the look in your plaid and your hiking boots. However, you intend to go to the bar, and have a very beautiful fancy cocktail in them
Yes.
and not go chop wood.
Nope.
And that's just wonderful. And it just takes all of these preconceived notions and shoves them right up everybody else's ass.
I just don't think, we need to be defined by
Yeah,
gender and gender stereotypes at all. I just don't think they serve anybody except straight white guys.
I agree.
So yeah, I just don't see a point in it. And recognizing that in myself in terms of like when I was younger and how did I want to present, and now being older, how do I want to present? And do I identify with being a butch lesbian? No. Do I identify with being a trans man? No. I see gender as a spectrum, and I identify along the spectrum of like, one, I think gender is bullshit. And it's funny because I actually had rejected the term non-binary because I'm like, that in a way is accepting that there is a binary
Right.
in a sort of meta abstract way. It is probably one of the more understandable terms for people. Gender nonconforming is almost synonymous with non-binary, but not quite.
Not
So
quite.
it's easier to kind of say non-binary, I think, for the benefit of other people. But I do think that gender is on a spectrum, and in terms of the way that I identify and like to present, yeah, I will. I wear makeup. I don't wear a lot of it. Don't get me wrong, but I'm vain enough that I want to put some foundation on and a little bit of bronzer. But I will also wear my suits and my fancy shoes and look a bit dapper. And that's just how I feel comfortable.
I love that. I love it. And I love you. So, all right, let's switch gears just a little bit. You mentioned a little bit ago that when you had that aha moment of what I'll no longer accept, you quit your job and you leaned fully into something that up until then had only been a
Mm.
passion, which was podcasting. You are this incredible example of left brain, right brain working together. I mean, you are a numbers, a finance part. Like you are a nope, let's check off the box, let's make a little list kind of person, but also
Type A.
you're super type A, but you're also incredibly creative. You're a singer-songwriter. I think this is cool about you. I don't know if the rest of you are as wild by this as I am, but when I found out you had your own Spotify channel, I was like, that's so cool.
I remember we were in the car driving to Sedona, and you were like, "Where can I listen to your music?" And I was like, "I don't know, Spotify." And you were like, "What?"
I said, I would love to hear your music sometime. And you went a little cocky
I
because you got a
did
lot of swagger,
not.
Stevie. You went, you want to listen to it right now?
I don't think
And I said, "Oh, how do we do that?" And you're like, "Just pull up Spotify." I was like, "Oh, okay." I'm not letting that slide because you're like, "Yeah, I'm fucking
I
cool.
did.
It's good."
Well,
Anyway, how did you get into podcasting? And you have several podcasts. Let's quickly talk about what they are and how you got into it. And now you're fully like your full-time job is podcast
Mhm.
producing. Interestingly enough, back in the finance world, which I think is really brilliant.
Mm.
But you've sort of created this reality for yourself. You envisioned it, and then that's that tenacity of yours. You just were like, well, this no nothing else is acceptable.
Mm.
So how'd you get there?
So the first podcast I started was a music podcast. And when I first moved over to New York, I was trying to get onto the music scene, and I found it very challenging. The way that music works over here, it's a very sort of festival style format at venues. You play a show, then someone else plays a show, someone else, and so on and so on. And the way that it had worked anywhere else really was, you tended to stay and meet the people on after you, and you met the people in the scene very quickly and very easily. A couple of people that I did meet, we were chatting about this problem and said, "Hey, why don't we start a songwriters circle?" So the three of us, we bring a few people each, and then we sort of cross pollinate our audiences. And we thought that's a great idea. So we created this event series, and we were doing this, and we had artists come. And then we thought, hey, a great way to market this would be a podcast where we interview one of the artists about one of their songs so that people who are coming to the show know what to expect. It's really hard to get in New York. New York's at part with their time and their money. So if they know that
Mhm.
they're going to enjoy it or that they're going to connect with an artist who's not the one they came to see, then they're more likely to come to the show. So that was how we started
Okay.
that particular podcast. And it was brilliant for me in terms of connecting to people, because I would just meet people that I wanted to meet, have conversations, and then sort of
Yeah.
created this network of musicians, which was awesome. And I think that we probably started that around like 2018. And obviously in 2020, the pandemic happened. I took that podcast weekly live on Facebook. I burnt out after about 8 months, which I think was pretty good going,
Yeah.
because I was still doing this with a full-time 50, 60-hour a week job.
Wow.
In around a few months into the pandemic, I remember it was June, I was reading Glennon Doyle's Untamed. Fabulous
I'm a
book.
fan.
Yes.
Mhm.
And there's this section in the book where a friend of hers is asking for advice, and Glennon says, what is the most, I think it's honest, authentic version of your life that you can imagine? I'm paraphrasing, but that was what she said. And I put the book down, thinking about my life as it is or was in finance, and I thought, it's not fucking this. It's not
Mhm.
this. And I was tied to that job. I had a visa, and I was 100% tied. I couldn't even go to a different company. I was stuck. And I thought, okay, well, let's put a pin in that for a second. But if I were able to take a blank piece of paper right now and design my life, what would it look like? And I had never given myself permission to do that.
Mm.
So I thought, oh, this is interesting. And I thought, okay, well, what do I really enjoy? And I think I'd probably just started my second podcast, which is a Star Trek podcast, just for fun. And I've learned so much doing that in terms of sound design, using music, creating sound effects, all of that stuff with my buddy Aki Ramis, who's in a wonderful band called Lake Street Dive. And through doing those two things together, I thought, oh, this is quite fun. I really enjoy doing this. And then I thought, okay, well, how can I get more experience and figure out exactly what it is that I like about this? Because, editing, I don't love editing, I'll be honest. It's not my favorite part of the process.
No.
I do it.
I love Andrew. He's my podcast
Yes.
editor,
Shout out to Andrew.
engineer. Yeah.
But I was like, okay, what is it that I enjoy about this? And I thought I need to figure this out. So there's a climate activist in the UK. Her name's Lizzie Carr. And I love Lizzie. She's wonderful. And I'd actually seen her first when she came to America, and she paddled down the Hudson River in New York to raise awareness for plastic pollution in our waterways. And she does a lot of that in the UK, but I think this was a big, fundraiser and, awareness drive. And it was actually before Greta Thunberg did something. So, and I think actually
Wow.
Lizzie was the first person to have paddleboarded down the Hudson. And so I had been watching her for a couple of years, and I reached out to her and said, hey, do you have a podcast? Because I love what you're doing. And I think there's a lot of people who would be really interested. And she said, oh, it's funny and she wrote me back, and she said, it's funny you say that. She said, I'm actually starting one, but I don't have anyone to manage it. And I said, oh, that's funny, isn't it?
I would like to manage it.
I could do that for you. So, we started working together. We did 2 seasons together, and she had a baby, so she's taken some time off. But I loved working with her, and I think I realized from working with Lizzie that what I really loved was the creative direction. Like,
Mm.
I loved working with somebody, and Lizzie is so wonderful, and was quite nervous about becoming a podcaster. And I was like, no, you're really good at this. You know what you're talking about. So she has this wonderful podcast where she's talking to change makers, whatever field that they were in, and it usually had a sustainability aspect to it. And I loved speaking with her about, who should we get on? And she was really thoughtful about the guests that she would have on in terms of diversity and diversity of thought, but also sort of diversity of topics.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, this is great. And I got really fired up about it. And I thought, this is what I want to do. I want to produce. I don't necessarily want to edit. If editing's part of it, that's fine. But I thought I want to produce. And so I got myself into all of the groups on Facebook, whether it was editors, whether it was producers, whatever. And then, Heather, I went to She Podcasts Summit in 2021
And fell in friend love with me.
fell in friend love with you. And met so many wonderful people at that event, not just yourself.
Yeah. No, I know. Amazing group of people. Yeah.
Shout out to our desert dogs. And met so many great people who then sort of hooked me up to this other sort of like independent audio producers group, which I then joined, which was wonderful for me. And then I paused that for a second. So that sort of was all starting to happen. My wife and I got married, and that allowed me to quit my job pursue a green card and then really pursue that career change full time. I was luckily able to leave that job with a bit of severance behind me, which allowed me to have a bit of a cushion in terms of that career change. You know, career change is very hard, and if you're going to, you know, go from a salary to absolutely zero, it's, you know, if you don't have savings, it's really tough. And I was able to
Yeah.
negotiate and secure that, and you know, hope that I got a job. And it was really jumping off a cliff because I didn't know whether I would get a job. I didn't know if I was going to be, you know, a gig producer. I didn't know if I was going to do seasons, if I was going to pitch episodes to like the NPRs or 99% Invisibles or whoever. Like I just didn't know what was going to happen. And luckily, and I shit you not, Heather, I applied for 100 jobs, more than.
Oh, I know. I remember.
Because I'm so type A, I kept a spreadsheet of it.
Of
Yeah.
course you did. But I remember really loving watching you do because you are so type A and you like to have answers, and the unsureness of it all was incredibly
Mm.
stressful for
Yeah.
you. It was really fun. That maybe isn't the right word to use, but to watch you lean into the unknown and surrender anyway, to still show up and push through and not give in and go back to the old type of job you had or walk away from that dream despite the discomfort and the fear.
Mhm.
And it was like a daily struggle for you.
I called Heather for mantras.
We did. We talked about lunches.
What am I gonna do? What if it doesn't happen? Oh my god. And you were wonderfully supportive, and I know that, you know, for you doing what you do as an entrepreneur for life, you know, you have these stresses, but you somehow managed
Mhm.
to survive with it. And it was too I didn't know how to do it, and it was such a learning experience for me.
Yeah, but you did it, and you now have this
I
new
do.
job, podcast producing for another financial
Mhm.
organization. But you also have are you still I should have checked this with you. You're producing a podcast out of Ukraine,
Yes, I am.
which I think is so incredible. Do you wanna quickly share with folks how that happened and what it is so they can go and listen and support?
Sure. So it's called Fighting for Ukraine, and I think it was around March 18th or March 19th. This Ukrainian journalist, whom I had seen be interviewed within my community of producers, he reached out to the group and said, "Hi, you know, my name is Yuri. I am a journalist in Ukraine, turned civilian soldier. I'm looking for some help. You know, I can do a story every day. You know, I wonder if anyone can help me." And I wrote back to him and said, because I was just like, "This is a podcast. This is 100% a podcast.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's what it is." And I said, "Hey, I think this is a podcast, you know, I think I could help you." And I didn't really know how much
What you
I
were
would
getting into.
kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but I said, "Hey, I was like, 'Hey, I could set this up for you, and then you could just go from there.'" But no, obviously it's a bit more involved than that. For the most part, it is just editing now. But we were able to, you know, Yuri I said, "Hey, do you wanna do this?" And Yuri put so much trust in me and said, "Yep, let's do this." We came up with a name. I came up with some cover art very quickly. From him sending that email to us getting it out on Apple Podcasts, we did it same day. I think we had
I
done it by
remember
5 p.m. that day.
well, we ran a trailer
That's right.
months ago, your very first trailer, just as you were coming out with the show. So it's very short, right? Just a
Mhm.
few minutes each day,
Yep.
just what is happening on the ground in Ukraine.
It's not even, I mean, it's less about, it's not news updates. It's just stories from Yuri about what
Mm,
he's encountering day to day. Like, if it were news updates, I don't think it would be as engaging. But Yuri is telling stories about people he's meeting, or whether it's encounters with Russian soldiers or the aftermath of encounters with Russian soldiers. Sometimes it's a really hard listen. There were one or
yeah,
two that I've put warnings on. Um, but, you know, he really puts you there with him. And it is it's an experience for a, you know, a wartime diary that I've never come across before. And it is so unique.
yeah. I just love that you took on that project and that you're helping him share his voice, and give truth to this Ukrainian experience. It's really lovely. All right. Well, we could obviously and have talked for hours and days, but
Mm.
podcast episode, we can't go on and on and on. I have never asked you this question, and so I'm
Oh.
really excited
Okay.
to hear your answer. I have theories. Stevie, how do you celebrate?
Celebrate what? Like my birthday?
Successes, wins, joy, anything?
I'll be honest, I'm not great at it.
Mhm.
I think I've
I knew that.
become I know you know that. Um, you're so annoying. Uh, you're so witchy like that. Um,
Oh.
Honestly, I have become better since getting married, actually. And I think and again, it's that sort of advocating for others. I think I try to be a good spouse and celebrate my wife when she has a win. And I think, and in turn, she's so great at celebrating me and celebrating with me that it makes it easier. And I think not that you need to have somebody else to do that, but I think, you know, maybe I'm a bit sometimes you're right. You say I'm left and right brained, you're right, but I think sometimes I'm just a bit dense and I don't know how to, be a bit normal. And
A little British about it,
a little
maybe?
British, yeah, absolutely. I think I don't when I say that I didn't advocate for myself previously, that's 100% true. I think I didn't think I was worthy of
Mm.
that, and I think there are things now that I'm relearning as I'm in some ways reparenting myself about how to
Mm.
love myself better. So,
Mm.
how's that? I'm working on it.
I love this question, and it's particularly fun to ask for folks that I know because I can tell you one of the ways that you celebrate, whether or not you've acknowledged that it is a way you celebrate, is that you text our friend group.
That's true.
You referenced our desert dogs, and you say, "This wonderful thing happened." And what is so amazing about celebration and gratitude being shared is it then goes into this wonderful echo chamber of people celebrating with you
Yeah.
all across the country then. People's little heart centers are getting more lit,
Mm.
and they're taking that out into the world.
Yep.
So you do that. Stevie, will you share your 3 words with us one last time?
Transformational. And, that's in relation to me being non-binary and some of the other changes that have
Lots
come
of
with that.
ways, yeah.
Belated because fucking was. But at the same time, I say belated and I think and I just want to explain these words, but I say belated because there's a part of me that's irritated with myself that it's taken this long, but it needed to take this long.
Yes.
So I think sometimes I want to recognize that it took a long time, but in recognizing that, I think I know that it needed to.
Yes. Everything happens at its perfect time.
Mm. And the last is unapologetic because now that I'm here, I'm like, I'm here and I'm queer and we're doing it.
Yes. I love it. I love it. You are unapologetic and in such a in control way that doesn't make others feel judged. It just makes them aware. And I think it's a real gift.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, last question. What is your favorite charitable organization to
Mm.
support?
Oh, it changes. But currently, I will say it is the TMI project, as that is something that I'm currently working on as their editor prior to starting my new job. The TMI project is an LGBTQ organization founded by Ava Tenuto and Julie Novak. They're doing some wonderful work. They have an incredible podcast called the TMI Project Podcast. And, I was just editing their first episode today, and it was with Celeste Lassane, who was the founder of the Trevor Project.
Oh, cool.
And so it was wonderful to hear that story. Then they also created an event where they invited people to share their stories who had been saved by the Trevor Project. So, yeah, I think they're doing some really, really impressive work. And if you are considering donating to anyone during the month of Pride, there are
So
numbers of
many.
organizations, but I'm sure the TMI Project link will be in the show notes. So it would be wonderful if you would support them.
It will be. And they will be our charity of the week as well. Oh, my friend, thank you for agreeing to be here and spend some time with me and sharing your just you. It's such a beautiful, radiant light of hope for everyone that you exist in the world. Thank you.
That is so kind. Heather, thank you. It is, you're right. When we met, it was this amazing electric friend connection. And you just exuded something that I saw in myself. And I loved the light that you have and the energy that you give to other people, and how much you want to give back to the world and others is very
Mm.
special. And I'm very grateful to be, someone you love and cherish.
Oh, I have all the feelings now. Thank you, Stevie. Thank you so much. All right, folks, that's all we've got for today. I want to hear, everyone at Team Brave wants to hear your stories of how you are out living unapologetically. And I love the prompt of, what are you no longer willing to accept?
Fuck yeah.
Fuck yeah. Why don't you share that with me? You can find us on Instagram at the Brave Files Podcast, and send a DM and let us know what is there for you. What are you no longer willing to accept? Thanks for listening. Thanks for being here. We'll talk to you soon. This is Heather Vickery reminding you today and every single day to go out and choose bravely. Bye now. You've been listening to The Brave Files, stories of people living courageously. Visit us at thebravefilespodcast.com to learn more about the show, find our show notes, and access full episode transcripts. And we'd love to know what you think of the show. We invite you to connect with us via Instagram and send a DM. You'll find us at the Brave Files Podcast on Instagram. Our music was created and produced in a custom collaboration with Matt Lewis from ML Creative Consulting, a boutique firm dedicated to helping clients identify their unique sound and amplify their brand with custom delivered soundtracks. Special thanks to everyone on Team Brave, from our audio engineer to our producers, associate producers, copy editors, writers, and support team. The show wouldn't exist without them, and we are eternally grateful. I'm your host and executive producer, Heather Vickery. Thanks for tuning in.